everyone. Welcome to Occupational Therapy 226, Family-Centered Intervention. My name is Melisa Kaye, and I'll be your instructor. This is a short video about family-centered intervention. So let's get started. 3 objectives. We want to think about family-centered intervention, know what that means. We will also want to look at the stages of grief that a family may experience. Grief is a big part of having a child with a disability, and we want to be sensitive and also knowledgeable about that. And then to use the case studies, which are an integral part of this class, to suggest how family-centered intervention can be applied. So we have 6 principles, and we'll go through them one at a time. The first is that the family is a constant, then recognizing family strengths and coping. 3rd, collaboration is key. 4th, open sharing of information is vital. 5, family-to-family support is also vital. And finally, we want to design accessible services that are culturally competent. So let's pull that apart a little. The family is the constant. This is super important, sounds like a no-brainer, but when we get in there with our skills and abilities, we might feel like, well, we know best. However, it's super important to remember that the family is who is always there, right? They have to live with that child 24/7 and care for that child 24/7, potentially throughout their entire lives. So that's important to know. Also recognizing the family's strengths and methods of coping. So we want to have a strengths-based approach and say to ourselves, what's working for this family? And then we can build on those things to augment or enhance our intervention efforts. 3rd is that service collaboration is key. So it's not just us. We're involved on a team that's helping the child. That team may include a variety of different kinds of professionals and lay people, but collaborating with them is really important. We typically have 1 hour a week, maybe with a child, and so we want to use our expertise to inform everyone's work with that child. The next one is open sharing of information. Kind of goes with the collaboration, right? So we collaborate, we share information, and we disseminate that information so that everybody can be on the same page in providing the best services possible to the child. Next up is family-to-family support is vital. So again, it kind of goes with the family as the constant, right? So hooking families up with other families who are in the same position can be just really powerful tool to helping our clients' families understand disability, understand prognosis, understand intervention efforts, etc. And then finally, designing services that are accessible and culturally competent, as you know, is paramount. So, not all families are the same. They vary for a variety of reasons, and culture is one of them. So culture, as we know, on the surface, there's what you eat and how you look and what your holidays are, but underneath are the deep beliefs about how children should be raised, what constitutes success, what does independence, interdependence, and dependence mean, and a variety of other factors that are that deep foundational part of culture. So we're going to screw up and we're not going to get it right all the time, but it is our very serious responsibility to work on that level with families so that we can provide the best care possible. All right, let's look at grief. Not a very light topic, but we want to know that grief is cyclical and the stages of grief are repeated. So families that have a child with a disability, they might go into denial and then out of denial, for example, when the child comes home from the hospital. They go back into denial when their child can't go to a typical preschool. They come out of it when they found an educational solution. They go back in when it's time for kindergarten, etc. So grief is cyclical, all the stages of it, not just denial. That was an example. And the stages are repeated because the child is going through different developmental stages and progression. Movement through the stages is not linear, so you don't go 1 to 5 and then you're done. It kind of goes back and forth. Families may be in one stage for a really long time, so we want to, as best as we can, acknowledge any judgment or bias we have around that and then set it aside. It's not going to do our families or our clients any good for us to layer judgment that they're still grieving on top of what our work is. And then finally, not all families experience all the stages of grief. So the stages of grief, and this is work from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross from several decades ago, but it still bears up. First, there's shock. Oh my goodness, what's happened? Denial, where we push away the reality of having a child with a disability and pretend that maybe nothing's wrong, that it's not happening, that the child doesn't need a diagnosis or services, things like that. Then anxiety, which is a very deep-seated worry and concern for the child and the situation. What will our family think? What will society think? Will people be looking at them funny? Like, all levels of anxiety can come up. Then guilt, especially for parents and caregivers. What did I do wrong that made my child this way, right? Then depression, which is an absence of hope or, motivation to think that anything can change. And that's a difficult place. And finally, acceptance. So again, all these stages can come in many different orders. They repeat. They can last for different periods of time. And we want to be aware of this overlay of psychological and emotional response and reaction to what's happening with the child with a disability around their diagnosis, but also around everything that they go through as they live their lives at home, at school, and in the community. So, a little preparation for class. Please look through this, think about it, jot some things down, bring your questions, bring your answers, and we'll look at it in class. So either look at the case study of Angela, Craig, or James, and these are all on Canvas for you. Question 1, how might OT intervention look if you were employing family-centered principles during the assessment and the intervention? Like, where do those things pop up? What would be the focus of service? What stages of grief might be prevalent? Different for different diagnoses, different for different families, for different stages of development, for different environments, a lot of differences. And finally, what's an obstacle or two that you could potentially identify to providing family-centered intervention? So again, thought question, there's nowhere to post this. I just want you to think about applying these concepts to some case studies. All right, everyone, that's it. I'll see you in class. Thanks for your attention. Bye-bye for now.